Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Audrey Rindlisbacher. So excited to have you here. Thanks for joining me today. Years ago, I saw an interview with a life coach. He's pretty popular. And he and his wife were being interviewed on a TV station. And they were telling the story of their weight loss. The man had some extra weight he was carrying, had a bit of a pudgy stomach. And but he didn't really care. He didn't really want to do much about it. It wasn't a big deal to him, but his wife really cared. She was carrying some extra weight. She really wanted to lose weight. So she hired a trainer for them, and she got a gym pass, and she nagged and nagged and nagged this life coach, her husband, to go to the gym and work out with her and this trainer. And finally, just because he loved his wife, out of the goodness of his heart, he decided, okay, honey, I'll go and we'll work out. I don't really think it's going to work. I don't really want to do it. I don't really believe in, this method that this trainer is going to use and all these things that we're doing, but I'll go along to make you happy. And when he was being interviewed, I remember it stuck out to me because he kept talking about this concept of that he didn't believe it, that he didn't really want to do it. And he talked about how day after day, she dragged him to the gym and he had a really bad attitude about it. He didn't want to be doing it and he didn't like it. He complained a lot. He didn't believe it was doing any good, but it meant a lot to her. And he had said that he would do it. So he went day after day after day. Well, as you can imagine, miracle of miracles, he actually started to lose weight, of course. And his shoulders got broader and his waist shrunk and it started to work. And so by the time they were done, and I don't know that they quit, but after a period of time of doing this with his wife, he came to believe in it. He came to think it was a great idea. Eventually he wanted to go. He still didn't love doing it, but his doubt had turned to belief. And his skepticism had turned into conviction. Now, I have been hearing a lot over the last few years, even from people that I'm close to. Things like, I don't believe that, or you should never ask somebody to do something that's contrary to their beliefs, or if you just live according to your beliefs or values, then you'll be happy, or the big one, I've got to figure out what I believe. Now, belief is important, but I want to make a case for how belief can work differently than we think that it works. Because, I'm not just talking about in a religious perspective. Obviously, I'm telling you the story of this guy that went to exercise, right? He was a non-believer and he became a believer. Now, hypothetically, he knew other people do exercise and they do lose weight. And technically, I guess if I go regularly, I probably should lose weight, but he didn't have any conviction. He didn't have any positive feelings about it. And one of the things that we hear in the world a lot is that we've got to fix our thoughts. We've got to have the right thoughts, and then that will lead to the right actions, and that will lead to the right results. And although working on your thoughts is great, I mean, in the academies I built, the Mission Driven Mom and Teen, we work on telling ourselves the truth. We talk about the power of thoughts, but I make a point there, and I want to elaborate on it for a few minutes, that the reverse is also true. We can also work on our actions, which changes our thoughts. And this man did the actions first, and then he came to believe. The conviction came after the action. And so even though it's true that conviction or belief can lead to actions that will lead to results, you can also choose to take an action. I'm going to talk about what that means, what that looks like, why that's the case. So this is from the National Library of Medicine. It says, beliefs are basically the guiding principles in life that provide direction and meaning in life. Beliefs are the preset, organized filters to our perceptions of the world, external and internal. Beliefs are like internal commands to the brain as to how to represent what is happening. When we congruently believe something to be true, then we have belief. In the absence of beliefs or an inability to tap into them, people feel disempowered. One of the biggest misconceptions people harbor is that belief is a static intellectual concept. Nothing can be further from the truth. Beliefs are a choice. We have the power to choose our beliefs. Our beliefs become our reality. It goes on to say, when we choose to change our thoughts, we become open and receptive to other pieces of sensory information hitherto blocked by our beliefs. When we change our thinking, we change our beliefs. When we change our beliefs, we change our behavior. Okay, so this is the common wisdom. And the problem with it is that often it's the case that try as we may, we can't seem to change our thoughts. And try as we may, we can't seem to generate feelings of belief. There are a lot of people who say they don't believe something. They might say they don't believe in God. They might say they don't believe in certain doctrines, but they also might say they don't believe in marriage. And in this case, this guy said he doesn't really believe in exercise. We toss this word around a lot. And basically what we mean when we say belief is an inner conviction. We trust that something is true or will be worthwhile in our lives or is in alignment with reality. But when we try to just generate a feeling of belief, it's often just not there. I mean, I believe people when they say they don't believe. It's true. When they search inside themselves, they think, I don't have feelings of belief around X, fill in the blank. Well, the problem with that is that some things are true, whether we like it or not, even whether we believe it or not. There are people that go around saying that the earth is flat or that aliens regularly visit the planet, and they really believe that. They really have conviction around that. They make life decisions based on those beliefs, but they don't align with reality. The earth is actually round. That's what's real. That's what's true. And it's not helpful to believe something that doesn't align with reality. But the problem there is we live in an information age and we're inundated with information 24/7. And there's more stuff uploaded onto YouTube every day than we could watch in a lifetime. So how are we going to navigate it? How are we going to know? And one of the reasons that we feel like we've got to, quote, decide what we believe is because now we're not insulated anymore in one little space, in one little town, in one little state, or even one little country. We know that other people, other places believe very different things. And so why do they believe those different things? And maybe we believe what they believe. And it just becomes so overwhelming so fast. So what are we going to do about all this? How are we going to navigate this? I had a conversation with my son a little while ago, and he actually made the statement that he would never ask someone to do something contrary to what they believe. And I know on the surface, that looks like a great idea. That seems like true. Yes, you don't believe that. I'm not going to tell you you should do that. The problem is that sometimes, so the example that I gave him, this is the example I'll give you. So I said, okay, so let's imagine a case where you know someone that you love dearly, and they have something in their past, maybe in their childhood, maybe they had a really awful spouse that, had an affair on them and left them. Maybe they were abused when they were a child. They had some really awful thing happen to them. And they're still really angry about it. They haven't gotten over it. They bring it up regularly. They use it as an excuse for why they can't move forward in their lives. They blame this person for where they're at or how they're feeling or what's going on or the opportunities they've been given or whatever the case might be. And you've spent enough time around this person to know that this is not helping them. This anger and resentment that they're hanging on to is causing a damage in their lives. It's keeping them from moving forward. And what you know is that the only way forward for them is to forgive this person. Because forgiveness isn't about letting the other person off the hook. Forgiveness is about letting go inside yourself and extending grace to yourself and to that person and leaving the past in the past and moving forward with your life, right? And I have other podcasts on forgiveness, and we talk about it in depth in the academies. I'll leave that for another conversation. But of course, we know that forgiveness is vital to our own emotional health. The other person may never even know that we forgave them. They may be dead, whatever the case might be. But for my own emotional, spiritual, mental, even physical health, I've got to move past the resentment. And I've talked about this with addiction recovery as well, like that resentment is at the root of addiction. So it can lead to addictive behaviors and all these other things that could destroy my life. So you're looking at this person and you're like, wow, they're really unhappy. Their life is really not working. They really need to forgive. So you recommend to them that they forgive, and they say, I don't believe in forgiveness. So what do? Do you leave it just there? Do you say, okay, well, all right then. You don't believe in it, then I guess there's nothing we can do. If you really love them and you've really had a profound experience with forgiveness yourself, and you really know that forgiveness really works, then you're going to try to convince them. You're going to, maybe not outright, maybe not all at once, but over time, you're going to plant seeds. You're going to maybe slip them a book or an article. You're going to maybe send them a video. You're going to maybe have a friend talk to them too. You're going to, tell them your own experience. Well, let me tell you what happened to me. And you're going to try to quote their testimony of this quote principle, this truth about the nature of reality and about the nature of humankind, that forgiveness really is the way forward for them. And you are going to try to get them to forgive, even if they don't believe in forgiveness. Now, could they forgive if they don't believe in forgiveness? Yes. And there's a lot of evidence around that I could give you. From a lot of people who are, for example, incest victims that didn't ever think they'd be able to forgive, and going into these therapeutic forgiveness sessions, they really didn't think it was going to work. They really didn't believe in it, but they did the things. So we say these things on the surface. We say, I've got to figure out what I believe, or I just don't believe that, or I don't believe in that, or you shouldn't ask someone to do something contrary to their beliefs. But it rubs me, it has rubbed me wrong for a long time. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, trying to work this out of my own mind. Like, why is this bothering me? What is this about this idea that I just think is fundamentally not helpful? And it's because some things are just true, whether we like it or not, or whether we believe it or not. And when we don't align with reality, we will have the consequences, whether we like it or not. So this person is having all these consequences of unforgiveness, and they're so unhappy, and they're stuck in their lives because they won't forgive, and they're claiming belief to get them off the hook. And this was one of the things. And again, I want to be clear as I head into this little segment that I'm going to talk about for a minute with belief. I want to be clear again. When people tell me they don't believe, I believe them. I'm not saying that they have all kinds of inner conviction and that they know. What I'm saying is, to say I don't believe it isn't helpful. And sometimes we say I don't believe that because we don't want to be accountable for it. Because what we've done in our culture over the last 100 years or so is we've become more and more secularized, and we've tried to draw, we've really tried to build this big, huge chasm between what's socially acceptable and what is morally required. And we've tried to claim that those are two different things. And what we've done over time is we've claimed disbelief. We've said, okay, well, I don't believe that. And then that means that you're not accountable for it. Now, we have certain social standards that we still hold people to. We're not letting anybody get off the hook by saying they don't believe in murder. We might put them in a mental institution, but we're going to hold them accountable if they murder somebody, because it's not good enough to say that they didn't know better or that they didn't believe in it. Because certain things are still considered right and wrong, which is great. But if you'll think about it for just a minute, you'll realize that anyone who is religious at all, let's take Christians, for example. If I tell you that I'm a Christian, what's going to happen is that you are instantly going to hold me to a different standard than you hold somebody to who isn't Christian. You're going to expect me to raise my behavior to a higher standard. You're going to hold me to that standard. You're going to expect me to treat people nicer, to be more generous, maybe to be more chaste, to be more moral, to be more honest. And, you know, you can even see this in the headlines. Like when somebody does something bad, but then they claim to be like religious or moral in some way, then that people are just even more incensed, right? They're just even more upset. Well, I can't believe they would do that because they're a whatever. They're a Christian in this case, right? And so sometimes we claim disbelief or doubt because, and it takes some real brutal self-honesty sometimes to get to the point where we're really willing to admit this, but sometimes it's just the easier path. Sometimes when we say we don't believe, we know that people are just going to let us off the hook. If I say, I don't believe in marriage, well, that's all fine and well, but what is that? What's the consequence of that for me not believing in marriage? And why have people believed in marriage across cultures and across time? They believed in marriage for a myriad of important reasons. And to discount that, to ignore that, to claim that my personal self-declared belief that runs contrary to human tradition is completely valid and that I shouldn't be. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you have to get married. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to discount the value of marriage and the way that it makes you rise to a higher level than you might otherwise have to when you give your life to another person and you have to sleep next to the person that you're angry with. Well, that's a whole different thing, right? So, but when you say you don't believe in something, then people tend to let you off the hook. If you say, I don't believe in God, well, then nobody expects you to XYZ, fill in the blank. You're not expected to pray. You're not expected to be as moral as other people. You're not expected to, give tithes or be generous or whatever the case might be. So we have to be very careful and we have to be very self-evaluating when we claim we don't believe something, especially if it's been a long established way of being for human beings, like religious practices or a belief in God or the marriage tradition or fidelity in relationships. You have to look long and hard at why that has worked for so long for so many billions of people before you make a declaration that you're going to ignore that and not live according to that and claim disbelief in it. Now, it's one thing to say, I don't believe that, and then to go about trying to find the truth. You test the seed, right? You look at the people who live according to the highest application of this truth. It could be forgiveness, it could be marriage, it could be charity, giving to charity. And you look at the people who do that the most, who have the best fruits in their lives, who have a life worth emulating, who have good results, and you go look for other evidence and you test it. You try it out. You live it for a while to see if it can manifest good things in your life too. Now, what I want to go to is what I think the remedy is here, because we can talk about this. Let me find. Okay. So we have this problem that we say we don't believe things. And what that usually means is we don't have an inner conviction. We don't trust it. We don't think it works. We don't think it's the right way. And that might be very true. But we could be wrong. And the trouble is that we don't know how to know if we're wrong. So what are we going to do about that? So I was really curious about something. I wanted to understand the difference in scripture between belief and faith, because those words are used in scripture a lot. And what I discovered when I went to Strong's Compendium is that in the Old Testament, it's Hebrew. In the New Testament, it's Greek. And in Greek and Hebrew, belief and faith have different root words. And I spent quite a bit of time in there researching the different verses and the different context that the words belief and faith are used in. And the statement I'm going to make next is going to seem controversial, because when I looked up a bunch of articles on the difference between faith and belief, there were quite a few articles that were like, yes, faith and belief are different. And all of them that I could find said this. They said some version of this. Well, faith and belief are different, and you can have belief but not faith, but you can't have faith without belief. You have to believe first, and then you'll have faith. I'm going to refute that. I'm going to say that that's not always the case. It is true that we could believe things. We could believe, for example, that it's very important for citizens to be involved in local government, and then proceed to do absolutely nothing about it. I've had that belief, and I've had times when I did nothing about it. So I know that's the case. I have a very strong conviction. I have read a lot of things about the importance of public involvement and helping people, get into office and all of that stuff, but I don't always do anything about it. What you find in scripture, by and large, and this is not the case all the time, and I do not have a doctorate degree, and I did not go to theology school, and there's a lot that I can't speak to. But the examples that I found in scripture lend themselves to a different way of looking at this concept of belief. Many of the verses that have the root word of belief and tell a story around belief are talking about a feeling. They're often about someone trusting in God, trusting in a prophet, trusting in a principle, and having that feeling that they believe. When faith, the word faith is used, it's usually talking about an action. If you pay attention to it and look around it, it's usually an action that's being addressed. Jesus does this a lot in the New Testament, where he says, I haven't seen such great faith, or it will be according to your faith. And he's talking about someone that's done something. So a really good example of this is when the father brings his epileptic son to Jesus. This is in Mark 9:24. And there's a big crowd, and he comes to Jesus with his son, and Jesus says to him that all things are possible to him that believes. And then the father says to Jesus, straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. This father could not find feelings of conviction in himself. He didn't believe. He didn't have all this strong belief and conviction. He's looking at Jesus and he's thinking to himself, I'm not sure if I really believe in you. I don't know for sure. I don't have an inner conviction. But he did something. He had faith. He took an action. He brought his son to Jesus and asked him to heal him. And so Jesus goes on to heal his son. And then through taking the action and bringing his son, his faith is rewarded and his belief is increased. So he did the action first. Now, maybe you could make the argument that there was just a tiny bit of belief or he wouldn't have taken the action. But we don't know. His own self-declaration is that he didn't believe. He needed God to help his belief. One of the ways I like to think about this that hopefully will be really helpful to you in thinking about, the title of this podcast is, what if I don't believe? What if you don't believe? What if you don't feel any inner conviction about a myriad of things? Are you off the hook? Does that mean you don't have to take any action? And does that mean that your actions wouldn't be helpful? My answer is no. You don't have to have belief to have faith. You can take actions, and those actions will increase your belief. They do go hand in hand. They do play into each other. But just like the life coach took the action when there was no belief, he did it out of love. He did it for love of his wife. And then he came to believe. And then that belief led him to testify. I have had a personal experience because I took action. This is where we're told that there's not a miracle until after our faith is tried, that miracles are witnesses of faith. They don't produce faith because you have to take an action and you have to engage in that action before you can see the results of it. It's the principle of the law of the harvest. There's a law of the harvest in force all the time in pretty much every area of our lives. And unless we're consistently doing, we don't get to have the fruits. So one way to think about this is the way that C.S. Lewis talks about love. And this is also something else we do in the academies, is we go into depth about this. So we are commanded to love. Okay, it's a commandment. What are the two great commandments? To love God and to love your neighbor as yourself, which I have a video on that and a podcast on that if you want to go learn more about that. So C.S. Lewis says, people are often worried. They're told they ought to love God. They cannot find such a feeling in themselves. What are they to do? This is exactly the same case of the person that needs to forgive, or the life coach that wants to go exercise, or the father who has an epileptic son. In many instances in our lives, we are unhappy, we are stuck, we are not getting the results that we want. And often it's because we're not taking proper actions that are principled actions. And sometimes we're not taking those actions that would really help us because we're claiming that we don't believe. We don't, not even claiming, we're stating a fact, like we really don't believe, we really don't have inner conviction. And C.S. Lewis is saying, but except God commanded us to forgive, and he commanded us to love, and he commanded us to be chaste, and he commanded us to pray, but we don't want to because we don't believe in those things. And yet they are part of the fabric of reality, and they bring incredible results and blessings. So what are we to do? He says, what are we to do if we don't have feelings of love for God? Maybe we don't even know if he's real. What do we do about that? And it's very much like belief. We can't generate those feelings within ourselves. And so we want to feel love just like we want to feel belief. If it's really true, if it's really part of the fabric of reality, we want to know that. We want to feel belief. We want to feel conviction. We want to feel love. What's the way? How is it accomplished? He says, act as if you did. Do not try do not sit trying to manufacture feelings. Ask yourself, if I were sure that I loved God, or in this case, or my neighbor, or my spouse, or anybody, what would I do? When you have found the answer, go and do it. And we can do the same thing with belief in any good principle that could bring positive benefits into our lives. When we see someone with a happy marriage, when we see someone with strong finances, when we see someone who has peace, spiritual peace, or a good relationship with God, or a healthy body, when we see these results in people's lives, it's because their behavior aligns with reality, whether they believe it or not, whether they feel inner conviction. But if they've had the results, they usually have the belief and the faith. So faith, like love, Lewis says, is a state not of the feelings, but of the will. And this is wonderful news, because it means that our beliefs, just like it says in the National Library of Medicine, our beliefs are choices, and we can choose otherwise. We can choose a different belief, and we can test the belief by having faith before we have conviction, by taking action on something that is true or good or beautiful. And we can trust the person that's telling us that. We can trust their results. We can have belief that there are principles, whatever, or we can just act We can do the thing, just like the life coach. We can go to the gym and we can complain and we can have a bad attitude, but as long as we're doing the action, it will eventually turn into conviction. The belief will follow. If you'll test the belief by having faith, you'll get the result. And I want to end with this, a beautiful promise that C.S. Lewis makes us. He says, as soon as we do this, in the case of love, we take loving actions. We ask ourselves, if I loved myself, what would I do? If I loved God, what would I do? If I loved my husband, what would I do? If I believed in God, what would I do? If I believed in resurrection, what would I do? If I believed in heaven, what would I do? If I believed in prayer, what would I do? And as soon as you do this, as soon as you have faith that can lead to belief, you find one of the great secrets. When you're behaving as if you loved someone, or when you're behaving as if you believed something, you presently come to believe it. That great secret that applies to love also applies to faith. When we choose to have faith, we will find that we have also come to believe. So if you want to figure out what you believe, if you don't feel feelings of belief, you can try faith instead. And what you'll come to discover is that there is truth outside of what you believe, that truth is attached to blessings and consequences that you can claim for yourself, and that the truth can literally set you free as you align your life with it. Thanks so much for joining me today. It would be awesome if you subscribed and liked and left a review so that other people can know about this podcast and channel and what we're doing here, so that the truth can set them free as well. Thanks for joining me. I will see you next time.